I believe that we are all sinful people, and there are no perfect people, and everyone has the right to make mistakes, as well as to be forgiven. But I also believe that there is a line that, having crossed, a person does not deserve forgiveness. I was close to making a catastrophic mistake, but my wife has already made it and paid for it. Have you ever encountered a business owner whose main reason for selling their company was to avoid betraying their spouse? Well, now you have, because I, Brent Voorhees, am that person. While it wasn't my sole motivation, it was certainly the primary one. My business started out in the typical garage startup fashion. With a background in biomedical engineering, I initially worked for a large corporation after college, but found the work unfulfilling. In my spare time, I became intrigued by the idea of developing rapid test kits for various medical conditions, allowing consumers to conveniently test themselves at home before seeking further medical advice. Without delving into unnecessary details, my goal was to ensure these tests provided no false negatives when used twice, 2 days apart, with up to a 10% margin for false positives, provided consumers were informed of this beforehand. Starting from my garage, I initially developed a test kit for babesiosis, a lesser-known tick-borne illness. I later sold the patent rights to a national testing laboratory. Subsequently, I delved into creating other test kits. Despite accruing debt to validate my kits by the third iteration, I felt confident enough to establish Resicit Inc. At the age of 43, Resicit was flourishing, with a substantial workforce of over 250 employees, attracting acquisition interest from various biomedical and pharmaceutical firms. It was then that I began considering the possibility of selling the company. By the time I reached 36, my first marriage had ended in divorce. Kathy and I tied the knot a year after college, and she stood by me through the challenges of launching our business from the garage. The strain of long hours and financial risk-taking during the startup phase strained our marriage, but the final blow came when I betrayed her trust by cheating. My infidelity stemmed from a sense of entitlement that arose after I sold the rights to my second test kit patent. Sophia, my affair partner, was young, impressionable, and enamored with me. After 3 encounters, I came to my senses and ended the affair. But Sophia didn't take the breakup well and informed Kathy about our dalliances. When Kathy confronted me, I didn't deny it, despite Sophia lacking concrete evidence. By then, I was burdened enough with guilt that I couldn't bring myself to compound my wrongs with lies. Confessing may have been cathartic, but it marked the end of my marriage, though thankfully we didn't have children. I believed I had reached the depths of despair until 183 days later, not that I was keeping track, following the official divorce decree, I discovered that Kathy had also been unfaithful to me, and far more frequently than I had suspected. Although the terms of my divorce didn't greatly impact my business or finances, largely due to pre-existing debts and Kathy's lack of confidence in my ventures, the emotional toll was nearly unbearable. At the age of 38, I tied the knot with my second wife, Brenda, just as Resicit was showing considerable promise. With sound legal advice, Brenda and I established a prenuptial agreement. I made sure to include a mutual morality clause in the agreement, serving as an added incentive, although unnecessary for me, to remain faithful. This item defined an extramarital relationship. This is any close bed contact as well as a French kiss, excluding ordinary kisses. Prior to our marriage and the signing of the prenup, I was completely transparent with Brenda about my history of infidelity and expressed deep remorse for it. She appeared content with the inclusion of the morality clause. Furthermore, the prenup stipulated that Brenda would not receive any portion of Resicit's assets, whether stocks or proceeds from sales, in the event of divorce, regardless of the circumstances, and I would not be entitled to any of her premarital assets, as she was quite well off. The consequences for breaching the morality clause were substantial. My troubles began during Resicit's peak growth phase, right around my 40th birthday. With the company flourishing, it became imperative to bring on a full-time HR professional. Consequently, I tasked our current part-timer, who was transitioning to another department with enthusiasm, to sift through resumes and arrange interviews with the top candidates. The initial candidate, Gail Preston, stood at a mere 5 feet 1 inch. But with her 5-inch heels and captivating presence, she seemed to tower at 7 feet tall and 350 pounds in terms of charisma. Despite her impressive credentials and background, it was her demeanor, the way she carried herself, her graceful gestures, and the subtle nuances in her speech that truly captivated me. By the time our meeting concluded, marked by a firm yet sensuous handshake, I found myself perspiring profusely with an uncomfortable stirring in my loins. I quickly realized it could be risky to be in the presence of this woman, but it wouldn't be fair to dismiss her solely because of her captivating allure. So I took action. I gathered my 2 vice presidents and announced, "Jim and Judy, I've chosen to step back from the HR director hiring process. Here are the resumes of the top 4 candidates. You 2 will make the decision. If needed, Ken will break any ties." Ken being the chief of engineering. "But didn't you just interview that energetic candidate who left your office 30 minutes ago?" Judy asked, puzzled. "Yes, she's one of the top 4. However, after the interview, I felt it best for someone else to decide. I've nominated you 2. So call her and bring her in for another interview along with the other 3, I muttered, feeling increasingly uneasy. Judy and Jim casually left my office, responding with a nonchalant "okay" before strolling out. I promptly headed to the gym, pushing myself to exhaustion. "I really hope they don't choose her," I muttered repeatedly as I lifted weights or watched TV on the elliptical. A week later, Judy and Jim entered my office early in the morning. "We've both come to the conclusion that Gail Preston is the strongest candidate," Judy declared. "She'll be starting next Monday. We've arranged for her to have the office opposite yours," Jim added. I gulped, forced a phony smile, and replied, "That's fantastic." It was just as terrible as I had anticipated. I had to interact with Gail, or at the very least see her every workday while I was in town. Given our highly sociable office environment, there were numerous events like parties, picnics, gatherings, and retreats where we inevitably crossed paths, often accompanied by our spouses, thankfully. Gail appeared to be happily married to her husband John, who worked as a stockbroker. Despite Gail's consistent friendliness at these gatherings, Brenda never seemed to warm up to her as she did to most other management employees. At the holiday party, after Gail had been in my various fantasies for about 2 years, somehow Gail and I ended up dancing together, and John and Brenda did the same. And just from her touch, I felt a strong rush of blood to my instrument. It's been a while since I've had this. I'm sure she felt my third leg, which formed while dancing with her. On the way home that evening, Brenda was noticeably distant. After that night, I became fixated on Gail. It was a mania. I spent too much time contemplating her, and whenever I replaced her at work, my mind involuntarily drew fantasies with her. It was at that moment that I came to the conclusion that in order to preserve my marriage and fulfill my obligation to refrain from adultery, I must distance myself from Gail. By the time of my disastrous encounter with Gail, I had received several serious offers from biomedical and pharmaceutical companies interested in acquiring Resicit. Our company boasted a substantial portfolio of valuable patents, encompassing nearly every aspect of our 31 commercial products, with even more promising innovations in development. Additionally, I had accumulated wealth far beyond my needs, and was inspired by the philanthropic examples set by figures like Bill and Melinda Gates and Warren Buffett. Thus, my desire to contribute to societal improvement rather than personal enrichment became a driving force. Yet in moments when thoughts of Gail invaded my mind during intimate moments with Brenda, I couldn't deny the true primary motive behind considering the sale. When I engaged potential buyers for Resicit, I included the 6 most senior members of the management team in the discussions, including Gail. Gail confided her concerns to me, expressing nervousness as she felt she might be the most dispensable member of the team, and feared she wouldn't find a suitable alternative job. I reassured her and tried my best to maintain professionalism, avoiding any inadvertent distraction as she sat across from my desk with crossed legs and a rising skirt. I eventually sold the company to the 3rd buyer out of 8, although all the offers were prohibitively high, which made the specific choice financially irrelevant to me. I chose them because I believed they were a good match, and because they agreed to provide Jim and Judy with 2-year ironclad employment contracts, and Gail with a 5-year contract. I made each of them promise to keep their contracts confidential. Gail became emotional, shedding tears of gratitude and embracing me tightly while kissing my cheek. In a somewhat childish gesture, I didn't wash away her tears from my cheek for 2 days. After leaving Resicit, now under the umbrella of Megabucks Pharmaceuticals, Gail maintained contact with me and extended numerous lunch invitations. I endeavored to turn these invitations into gatherings involving our spouses, which was mostly successful, although I perceived that Gail was occasionally put off by my approach. During these occasions, I noticed a growing distance between Gail and John, and Brenda tended to be more reserved for a few days afterward. Eventually, I began to find excuses to decline Gail's invitations. I became deeply involved in my philanthropic endeavors and found genuine enjoyment in life, although my thoughts about Gail remained strong. I had been away from Resikit for nearly 2 years, during which I hadn't returned Gail's recent calls. However, as the former owner of Resikit, which was now a separate division of Megabucks, I still received invitations to its social events, including the annual end-of-the-year holiday party. Wanting to attend, I contacted the event organizer to inquire about Gail and John's attendance. Upon being informed that they wouldn't be there, I decided to go. Although I hoped Brenda could accompany me on Friday night, she declined due to a business trip that wouldn't conclude until Saturday morning. Despite not needing the money, Brenda continued working because she found satisfaction in it. Upon arriving at the hotel where the party was being held, I received a warm welcome from nearly everyone present. It appeared that the employees were appreciative of my decision to sell to Megabucks, evidently a reputable employer, and were satisfied with the $10,000 bonuses I had distributed to each of them upon my departure. Contrary to what I had been informed, I spotted Gail at the event. As soon as she noticed me, she approached with a fierce glare in her eyes. "Why have you been avoiding me, Brent Voorhees? I thought you cared about me, especially considering how you secured me that 5-year employment contract before you left," she scolded, jabbing her index finger at my chest. I noticed her speech was a bit slurred. Gail seldom drank more than a glass of wine, but that evening she appeared almost intoxicated. Well, I haven't, been avoiding you, Gail. I've just been really busy," I stammered defensively, feeling the sweat forming. Where's John?" I asked, hoping to divert the conversation. "He's not here. And don't try to evade. I know you've been avoiding me, and by the end of the night I'll find out why. Now dance with me," she commanded. Gail and I shared the dance floor for about 5 or 6 dances, even enduring one painfully slow one, until I finally persuaded her that I needed to speak with the division manager and his wife, along with other management personnel brought in by Megabucks. "Okay, but only if you agree to meet me for a drink at the hotel bar after the party to discuss a few matters." All right," I muttered. Before approaching the division manager, I dialed Brenda's number on my cell phone and reached her voicemail, leaving a message. My expectation that Gail wouldn't find me once the party slowed down turned out to be unfounded. She grabbed my arm and ushered me into the bar before the band's final song. We settled at a secluded, dimly lit table towards the rear of the bar and ordered drinks. She opted for a Cherry Queen, while I chose a Virgin Mary. In reality, Gail didn't need another drink because for the first time that I'd known her, she was quite drunk or close to it. Nevertheless, I wasn't going to suggest she switch to a non-alcoholic option. I simply grinned and braced myself for what was to come. I've removed all slurring from her conversation. "So, Brent, let's cut to the chase. I believe you've been avoiding me because you're genuinely attracted to me. Come on, admit it." "What makes you think that, Gail?" "Because you've always been exceptionally nice to me, yet somewhat reserved. You visibly enjoy our dances, and you can't help but stare at my thighs, although I can't understand why since they're nothing special," she teased, followed by a belch and a giggle. "Well, I do like you, but I don't think I'm really into you like that," I began to say. But she interrupted with a sharp, "Bullshit." "Come on, admit it, you're into me," she insisted, giving me a pointed look. "If you don't admit it, I'll just plop down on your lap," she teased. Well, you're attractive. I suppose most straight guys would find you appealing," I replied, loosening my tie as my collar felt tight. "No way. Have you seen my figure? I don't have the kind of shapes that most guys drool over," she retorted. "Hi, Gail," I muttered, but she ignored me. "And don't even think about complimenting my figure," she chuckled. In fact, I didn't hear much because my jaw dropped while I was looking at her. "And why are you staring at my hips?" "They're too muscular because I used to skate and ski when I was younger," she added, then giggled and giggled again just as our drinks arrived. To be honest, Gail's hips are exceptional. They are muscular, but at the same time they tend to the attractive side of the muscles, not the unattractive side. After taking a few sips of cherry peach, Gail continued, "Besides, it can be difficult to live with me. I have a strong attraction, and when I'm in the mood, I'm persistent. And if John isn't ready to come into the bedroom with me at any convenient moment, well, he's out of luck. I expect daily attention from him." She grinned. Then she listed all her supposed shortcomings, for example, snoring, morning irritation, and so on, to which I muttered, every time, but she did not pay attention. After 45 minutes, during which she humiliated herself, ostensibly to show that I shouldn't have feelings for her and that we should just remain friends, I felt even more fascinated by her. She wasn't just a bed symbol. She was a real person. As soon as Gail finished her second Cherry Queen cocktail, her eyes glazed over. I gently took hold of her arm, peered into her unfocused eyes, and inquired, "Gail, are you feeling okay? You seem like you might faint." "I'm a bit dizzy," she chuckled, her eyes still lacking focus. "I'll arrange for a cab," I offered. "I'm staying at the hotel tonight," she replied, rummaging in her purse. After some struggle, during which she accidentally spilled some makeup that I picked up for her, she produced a key card and waved it at me. "What room are you in? I'll help you get there." "Damn, I can't remember. Probably on the 16th, maybe 17th. I think it's 1705, she muttered. "Let's head to the front desk," I suggested, assisting her and guiding her towards the reception area as she leaned on me to steady herself. Upon arriving at the reception desk, I presented Madeline, the desk clerk, with both Gail Preston's keycard and my driver's license. "Madeline, my friend Gail Preston here seems to have forgotten her room number despite being registered at your hotel. Could you please assist us by confirming her room?" I inquired. Madeline hesitated, observing Gail's apparent intoxication before responding, I'm not entirely certain if I should. I've provided you with my driver's license to ensure accountability. I merely intend to escort Mrs. Preston to her room and leave a note for housekeeping not to disturb her. Any additional charges for a late checkout will be covered by me," I calmly explained, emphasizing the responsible course of action. I could sense Madeline's lingering uncertainty, prompting me to add, "Madeline, could you please confirm with the manager? I don't want to cause any issues for you, but Mrs. Preston requires assistance." Madeline disappeared into the back room and reappeared after 2 minutes with a reassuring smile. "The manager said it's okay. I'll make a copy of your driver's license and then verify the room number with her keycard." After making a copy of my driver's license, entertained by Gail's laughter and her grasp on my chest and arms, Madeline swiped the keycard at her desk and jotted down the room number on a piece of paper, which she then handed to me. The note read, 1825. At least she got the first and last digits right out of the 4. I chuckled silently as I guided Gail towards the elevator. Gail was chatty, though much of what she said was nonsensical, as I practically carried her to the elevator and then to her room. As I unlocked her door, she pecked my cheek and said, "Thanks, Brent. Could you help me out of my dress and hang it up? Sleeping in it would ruin it." At first I had doubts about this idea, but I couldn't find a way to avoid it. I unzipped the sleeve of her dress, and when it slipped off, the 8th wonder of the world opened in front of me. I literally did not expect that it would amaze me so much. I tried to distract myself from stupid thoughts as much as possible and just did what every adequate guy should have done. I took off her shoes, hung them in the closet in her room, and hung her dress. Carefully placing her feet on the bed, I covered her with a blanket, taking one last look at her before leaving. When I left after seeing the girl off, she suddenly grabbed me by the lapel of my jacket, pulled me to her, and kissed me passionately on the lips. After letting go, she just said thank you, and everything turned upside down. By the time I turned off the light and left the room, she was already snoring. I wasn't surprised because I had been warned. While I was driving home in the limo with Slate, all my thoughts were occupied with this girl. Thank God I wasn't driving, was the only consolation I could find. Brenda showed up at our place around 11 on Saturday morning. After a quick exchange of greetings and inquiries about each other's recent events, she mentioned needing a shower. She set her iPhone and purse on the kitchen counter and stowed her suitcase in the laundry room before heading upstairs. While I sipped orange juice in the kitchen, I felt a tinge of guilt, despite not having done anything wrong. My thoughts about Gail made me even more uneasy. Just then, a cell phone buzzed. I genuinely believed that the phone in question was mine. I rose from my seat and approached the counter where both my iPhone and Brenda's identical one were placed. It was purely coincidental that I noticed the message on what I later discovered was Brenda's phone. It read, "You are my best FK ever, lovely," accompanied by a mischievous emoji and bill. Bill Benson was a colleague of Brenda's, presumably accompanying her on her recent business trip. I slumped into the nearest chair, my thoughts swirling. However, I managed to regain composure and was mostly rational by the time Brenda strolled back into the kitchen, wearing a robe with wet hair from the shower. "Why do you look like your dog just died?" she quipped upon seeing me. I stared at her, devoid of a smile, and retorted, "Because my marriage just ended." She appeared taken aback. Handing her iPhone back to her, I instructed, "Check your last text." She tapped a few buttons and then covered her face with her hand. "How long have you been having an affair with Bill?" I demanded angrily. Her expression shifted from surprise to defiance. "About 1/10 of the time you've been having an affair with Gail Preston," she sneered. "I've never had close contact with Gail," I retorted. "Maybe not, but you've been emotionally attached to her since the day you met," Brenda retorted. "How did you come to this conclusion?" I asked, and my voice cracked because I couldn't deny our emotional connection, despite my best efforts to keep it platonic. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's because of the strange expression on your face when you're next to her. Or maybe it's because of the spontaneous reactions you have when you dance with her." I had no idea how she understood it. "Of course you shouted her name in your sleep and even twice during intimacy with me, freak," she growled. The final remark caught me off guard, yet I couldn't refute it. Perhaps I had. "So does that justify you sleeping with Bill Benson for the past 5, 6, however many months?" I shouted. "I needed a backup plan for when you decided to leave me once your emotional connection turned physical," Brenda responded, her expression now tinged with sadness, a tear forming in her eye, and her arms tightly crossed. We exchanged silent glances for what felt like 30 minutes, though it was probably only a couple of minutes. Eventually, I stood up from my chair and suggested, "Why don't you come home early on Monday afternoon so I can serve you here instead of at your office? I won't insist on enforcing the morality clause in the prenup." I ascended to my bedroom, packed the necessary clothes and supplies for the next few days into a suitcase, and left the house. Just before I walked out, Brenda tearfully asked, "So that's it?" Without turning back to face her, I responded, "Yes, that's it. Since it's my house, you'll need to vacate within the next month according to the terms of the prenup," as I stepped over the threshold without bothering to close the door behind me. Brenda didn't attempt to make amends. Not that it would have made a difference, as I wasn't feeling inclined to reconcile. A few days after receiving the divorce papers, she signed the settlement document swiftly, given the clarity of the prenup's provisions. Despite her awareness that I had the option, I chose not to invoke the morality clause. I remained at our beach house for the following month until she left our former suburban residence. She departed with only a minimal amount of belongings beyond what she was entitled to. I got a call from Gail on Monday night, shortly after Brenda had been served. I chose to pick up. After a brief exchange of greetings, she went straight to the point. "I want to apologize if I came off too harshly towards you at the party on Friday, Brent. Although it's not an excuse, I was drunk for the first time since college and felt like sharing what was on my mind." "I understand, Gail. You didn't do anything wrong. I also want to thank you for helping me back to my room when I was drunk. But how did I end up only in a thong?" "You insisted I take off your dress so you wouldn't ruin it by sleeping in it and hang it up in the closet," I replied with a chuckle. "That sounds like me," she chuckled in response. "Did you get a good look?" "Yes, I certainly did," I chuckled again. "Was it as bad as I warned you it would be?" she asked, chuckling once more. "Actually, you looked like Aphrodite," I replied after a pause, then quickly added, "But let's not dwell on that anymore." "Agreed. However, I called about another matter," Gail said, her tone serious. "What's that?" "I received a call from Brenda this afternoon. She criticized me harshly, called me a siren, but not the type from the fire department. She had no right to attack you. You did nothing wrong. It's not your fault that you're incredibly attractive," I replied, matching her seriousness. "Are you really divorcing her?" "Yes, I am. I can't tolerate infidelity. My attraction to you wasn't cheating, but her affair with her coworker was. Listen, I can't discuss it with you or anyone else. I'm going to take some time off. I wish you well," I said, feeling emotional. "I understand. Good luck, Brent. And who knows, maybe we'll reconnect under different circumstances," she replied, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Perhaps," I replied as I hung up my cell phone. I wasn't as composed and collected about my divorce as I initially seemed to others. While I acknowledged that my focus on Gail could be seen as an emotional affair, I genuinely believed I deserved recognition for taking steps to prevent it from turning physical. I felt resentment towards Brenda for equating my emotional involvement with Gail to her physical affair. If Gail was such a problem for her, she could have ended our marriage before getting involved with Bill. The situation also brought back the disgust I felt upon discovering long after the divorce that my first wife, Kathy, had cheated on me, but portrayed herself as a victim during our separation. To overcome the betrayal of both my unfaithful wives, I felt the need for a drastic response. However, my upbringing and beliefs about respecting women prevented me from retaliating against Kathy and Brenda. Yet Bill, along with Kathy's lover-turned-husband Winston, presented a different situation. With ample financial resources at my disposal, I realized I could exact revenge on them without fear of consequences. For the following month, I dedicated myself solely to my primary philanthropic endeavors, while simultaneously deploying 2 teams of private investigators to gather information on Bill and Winston. Additionally, I engaged another organization known for its dubious methods to explore potential revenge strategies. At the end of the 30-day period, I received comprehensive reports from all 3 entities. Bill and Winston shared a common passion: their cars. While Bill enjoyed countryside drives with his cherished vehicle, Winston frequented rough neighborhoods every other week. I enlisted a hacker to uncover details about their car insurance policies, and shortly after changing their addresses, I arranged for their policies to be canceled. A month later, when Bill's car was parked in the countryside and Winston's in a dodgy area, I immobilized 2 wheels of each car with Denver boots, breaking the keys off in the process. Simultaneously, I had the trunks and interiors of both cars sprayed with butyric acid, one of the most repugnant substances known to humanity. I still had unfinished business with the 2 jerks. The next step would affect Kathy and Brenda as well. But I had already made up my mind that as long as I didn't physically or financially harm them, tough luck. I enlisted some shady individuals to break into Kathy and Winston's house, as well as Bill's condo where Brenda frequently stayed overnight. I had the mattresses in the main bedrooms rigged to trigger a hidden noise generator in the ductwork elsewhere in the house or condo if there was any significant activity on the beds, besides normal movement during sleep. Each residence had several noise generators with different sounds installed, and a computer chip cycled between them to activate the bed sensors. I hoped that whenever these lying ex-wives of mine were doing bed chores in their bedrooms, disturbing noises would echo throughout the house, preventing them from making love. Since all the devices were wireless and cleverly disguised, I assumed it would be months before they could detect interference and neutralize it. Having carried out my revenge, I fled to Aruba for a month, trying to forget about my marriages and maybe even my attachment to Gail. After spending around 10 days in Aruba, I returned to my luxury hotel lobby following a session of paddleboarding. Suddenly, a lively woman, bearing a striking resemblance to Gail Preston, intercepted me, blocking my path. Fortunately, Brent, you're not hard to find. I only had to shell out about $1,000 to track you down. A familiar voice emanated from behind a pair of oversized sunglasses and a hat. Gail, was my astute reply. In the flesh, she grinned. What brings you here? I foolishly asked. Looking for you, obviously. We need to have a chat. Where's your room? Well, okay, it's one of the penthouses, I muttered. Great, she chuckled, taking hold of my arm and leading me towards the elevators. We casually discussed the weather, the hotel, and Aruba's natural surroundings until we reached my room. You need to take a seat, Gail insisted sharply as she directed me towards one of the many sofas in the penthouse anteroom while she remained standing. After she removed her sunglasses and hat, she began. John initiated divorce proceedings about 3 weeks ago, she declared. Why? I queried, the news and Gail's striking figure already stirring a reaction. He claimed he was tired of my emotional affair and wanted out. Emotional affair with whom? I asked, genuinely puzzled. With you, you idiot, she snapped. Who else did you think it was with? Gail stood there, hands on her hips, a sneer on her lips. My mind was trying to make sense of the situation. While my thoughts were racing, my face was burning, and my desire was growing, she finally muttered, Well, are you going to do something, or are you just going to sit there with that puzzled expression on your face? After a short pause, I jumped out of bed, lifted her up, and imprinted on her lips the most passionate French kiss I have ever given her. When we were done with the kiss, I carried her to the bedroom. 10 seconds later, we were completely engaged and enjoying each other. When we were done, we lay side by side, exchanging quick, playful kisses, both of us smiling contentedly. "You really did it, champ. It was an absolutely incredible session," she giggled. "You're even more amazing in real life than in my fantasies." I chuckled. I didn't think it was possible. "Listen, Eros," she continued. "Why don't we just have fun, surf, dance, eat, and, of course, do some bed sports for the next 2 weeks, and then have a serious discussion about everything?" "Can you give up megabucks for 2 weeks?" I asked. "I've already quit. It's not a problem," she chuckled. "Did you quit?" I asked. "Absolutely. I believe that somewhere there is a handsome, charming, rich guy who would like to support and pamper me more than anything in the world. And guess what? I suggest you apply for this role first," she replied with a mischievous smile. Even before she mentioned the role, we had another contact. Our conversation after 2 weeks has not become an important event. By that time, we both realized that our attraction to each other was sincere. We connected like two pieces of a puzzle. We got married 3 months after Gail officially divorced. Less than 2 months later, she became pregnant with twins. Now we are devoted parents who not only do household chores, but also do marital duty in the bedroom at least 5 times a week. And I have never fantasized about anyone but my wonderful wife.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!